Does a thumb flick really ruin your jump shot? Do you need to have your elbow super tucked in to become an elite shooter? Well, in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the 7 most common shooting myths, and then we're going to expose them and tell you if they really are a myth and if you really need to fix them. I'm Coach Meach. Let's dive into it. When we think about our thumb flick, when it comes to shooting, we want to make sure we want to shoot the ball straight as possible. So that thumb flick, it typically says we're pushing it. So now we're throwing off the basketball, so it's going to be curving left or right. Now that's the myth. If you watch some of the NBA players or some of even the great WNBA players, you will see they actually have a thumb flick in their shot. But the difference between their thumb flick and some of your guys' shooting thumb flicks is their thumb flick happens early. So when they go to shoot, their thumb pushes the basketball and it comes off early, but the last hand to touch the basketball is their shooting hand. We really only need to fix our thumb flick if our thumb flick is happening later in our shot. So if we're getting into our shot as we're going to shoot, if our thumb flick is happening at the same time or later, so it's actually influencing the basketball, so it's pushing it to the right or to the left, that's when we need to adjust. If your thumb flick is happening earlier, so as we're getting into our shot, it's already pushed the basketball, but your last hand to touch it is your shooting hand, you do not necessarily need to fix it, because you'll see great shooters like Caitlin Clark and Kyrie Irving still have this ability to knock down shots with that thumb flick. The next myth we are breaking down is your elbow. A lot of people love to tell you need to tuck your elbow into your side really tight, and then when you raise it, now it is straight and it's gonna go towards the rim. That's not necessarily true. You don't need to over tuck your elbow, because that leads to other issues down the line. When you over tuck your elbow to your side and then you try to lift the basketball, now you're putting too much tension in your shooting side shoulder, and then you put your wrist in an uncomfortable position. So now when you go to shoot, everything is unnatural. So you want to just be comfortable, nice and relaxed. So when you go to raise the basketball, your wrist is underneath the basketball, but your elbow is still in the right spot. So you don't need to over tuck here, you're comfortable. We do not want your elbow out flared like this. So now when you go to shoot, now that ball is going in different directions because you can't shoot straight because your elbow is not in the right spot. We want to focus on your wrist being underneath the basketball, elbow in a comfortable position. So now when you go to flick your wrist, your arm and your elbow actually stay straight towards the hoop because it straightens out naturally. If you watch great shooters like Devin Booker and Damian Lillard, you'll see how their elbow straightens out naturally at the end of their jump shot. So even if their elbow isn't exactly all the way tucked and it's slightly flared, when you go to flick your wrist, your elbow is going to naturally straighten out and go towards the rim, and that's what we're looking for. If your elbow is turned out to the side at the top of your jump shot, when you go to push, then your elbow is not gonna straighten out and you're gonna push the ball to the left or to the right, and now you're gonna have to overcompensate in other ways. So you always wanna make sure you can shoot the ball straight, keeping that elbow tucked. So the third myth we are going to be breaking down is being able to shoot the same shot every single time. Now that is not necessarily a full myth. I just think they teach that topic wrong. You can't shoot the same shot every single way, every single time, because not every single shot is the same shot. So if I'm shooting a wide open stationary catch and shoot shot off of a swing pass, I'm gonna shoot this shot a certain way. But if I get into my mid range, let's say I'm in the mid post and I wanna get something like a fadeaway and I'm shooting a fadeaway shot, now I'm gonna shoot that shot differently. Same thing if I'm getting to maybe like a mid range pull up like Devin Booker and I'm trying to hit the game winner, that shot's a little bit different. So you can't shoot that same shot, all 3 of those, the same way you would shoot the stationary catch and shoot shot. So what they mean is you wanna keep the same principles. And one of the principles you wanna keep is moving the ball first. So if we're nice and low, when we move the ball first, we let the ball lead. Then once we get to our set point, that's when we can use our body to jump and then go into our shot. So you can do that in all 3 of those types of shots. Another thing we wanna think about doing is getting our wrist underneath the basketball. So if I'm doing a stationary catch and shoot shot, I want my wrist under the basketball every single time. The same goes for my fadeaway. If I'm getting into the mid range, as I get in here, once I get to my fadeaway, I want to make sure my wrist is still underneath the ball the entire time. So it doesn't matter what shot it is, you want to keep the same basic principles, but still little tweaks. Hey, if you guys are struggling with your shooting form and you want help, just go ahead to the pinned comment below and click the link. You'll get your own copy of our ultimate shooting checklist to help you guys master your shooting form. So this next myth we're breaking down is more of a recent myth, and they're saying that you need no form to shoot and it doesn't matter what it looks like. I think they're just trying to be totally opposite of what the old myth was, where you need to be super perfect, right? Where you need the 90-degree elbow in between your armpit here and your wrist underneath the basketball. You need to be super perfect. Now they're just going to be completely opposite, and I think that's an issue. So the truth is, you don't need to be on either side. You don't need to be super perfect or completely formless. You need to be right in the middle and make sure you're mastering the fundamentals. Everybody needs to make sure that your wrist is underneath the basketball so you can shoot the ball straight. You don't need to have your form cocked out to the side, because now that's going to mess up your shooting form. Now, you can tweak these things to fit you specifically. So with somebody like Giannis is not gonna shoot the same way Steph Curry would shoot. Giannis is like 7 foot tall and Steph Curry is like 6 foot tall, so their body shapes are different, but they still need to follow the same principles. Having your wrist underneath the basketball, making sure you stay on balance and nothing crazy is going on within your shot. For my beginners out there, you guys want to make sure you don't completely disregard the fundamentals. You guys have to master them. So once you're going through your workouts, you want to make sure you're paying attention to having your wrist underneath the basketball. You're nice and balanced, so you're not leaning to one side or the other. You want to make sure you're locking in on those fundamentals. But as you go through your shooting journey, you'll start to see your shot is going to slightly change, because you're going to fit things to who you are and how you play. If you watch Steph Curry when he was a senior at Davidson College, his set point was a little bit higher, but now his set point is a little bit lower. He has slightly tweaked his shot. Now, I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but you will see a change as he's going through his journey. Our next shooting myth is not completely a shooting myth, but I believe it is taught wrong sometimes. So a lot of people love to teach you got to have a lot of arc on your shot when you're getting into it. And that is true, but not completely true. You don't want too much arc. So if you shoot the ball too high, it's actually going to ruin one of the other things that the ball needs to do to go in. So for this ball to actually just go into the basket, it needs to go up, out, and straight. If you shoot too high, then it ruins the ball going too far. So it'll fall short instead of going far enough. We need the ball to go up, but it also needs to go out as well. So as we're getting into our shot, if we just shot the ball straight up in the air with our arms straight up and down, the ball is just gonna go up and then come right back down. We need to get the ball to go out as well. So as we're getting into our shot, when we get to our set point, we need to make sure our wrist is underneath the basketball. And then as we go to shoot it, a good point to think about is having our elbow get to our eyebrow. So as we release it, we want our hand going up, our elbow going up, but now my elbow is at least the same level as my eyebrow or higher. We don't want the elbow to be behind our head, straight out, or too low. We want it to be up in between the middle of that, right at our eyebrow level. A quick shooting tip to help you guys with your arc: when you're shooting closer to the basket, you don't need to shoot necessarily as high because you are closer. As you step out further away from the three, so you're starting to shoot from the NBA range, maybe further out, that's when you need to start shooting higher to accompany for more power going towards the rim. If you shoot lower, the further you step out, it's going to be hard to get the ball to go over the front of that rim. So you want to make sure if you're moving to the left, to the right, so you're doing your side steps, or the further you step back, you want to increase that arc. Remember, it doesn't want to be too high where the ball is going straight up, but it needs to go out as well. So our next shooting myth is having a gap with your shooting hand when you go in to shoot. So a lot of people love to say you need to have that space in between your hand when you're looking to shoot, and you want to be able to see through this little bitty hole right here, and that will be a good enough position to get a nice touch with your shot. When it comes to our shooting gap, we want it to be natural. So when we lift our shot to our set point and it's in our hand, the ball is going to naturally sit in our hand comfortably and have that gap just because of the way our hand is set up. So if you could just look at your hand right now and just feel right in between your thumb and your pinky, you'll feel like a small divot. So when you go to shoot, that's going to be the natural gap that you have. If you force the gap, you're going to drop your thumb underneath, and now it's going to create tension in your wrist. And when you have tension in your wrist, that creates uncomfortable flick, if you want to think about it. We want to have a flat hand, so now when we go to shoot, it's flatter on here, but it's more comfortable and it creates a better flow when you go to flick and it comes off your fingertips nice and smooth. So when it comes to having that natural gap with your hand, you don't want the ball to sit too low into your hand. So when it's sitting in your palm, now it's going to have a weird rotation coming off because it's trying to roll up your hand and then get to your fingertips. So you want the ball to just sit into your hand naturally. So when you move move it, it's just sitting completely in your hand naturally, so you can just flick your wrist and have it come off your fingertips last. So you wanna have your fingers spread, not too wide to where you're forcing it, but you wanna have enough coverage on the basketball. So now, once you lift it, you can just push through the middle, flick your wrist hard, and now you can control your shot and it's gonna go all net. The last shooting myth we'll be talking about is where you have to be 10 toes facing to the basket. Now that's not true at all. You will look across the whole NBA, WNBA, college players, all the elite shooters will have a slight tilt to the side when they shoot the basketball. It's not about being a 10 toes to the rim shooter or a tilt shooter. You can be a great shooter either way. It matters what's comfortable to you. So if you line up at the free throw line and being 10 toes to the rim, that feels comfortable for you, that's what I want you to stick with. If you want to turn your toes slightly to the side, that's what I want you to stick with. But what matters is where you pick up the basketball. So if you stay 10 toes to the rim, I want you to pick up the basketball on your strong side hip. So I'm left-handed, I would want the ball on my left side hip. For you right-handed people, it would just be opposite. The reason why is when you go to raise the basketball, everything stays in line, your elbow's in the right spot, your shoulders in the right spot, and now when you go to shoot it, everything stays straight. If you pick up the basketball in the middle of your body, keeping 10 toes to the rim, that's where things start to mess up, because now my arm is flared out, but when I raise it, everything else is straight. So now that doesn't align. So when I go to shoot, now I'm gonna be off. What I wanna do is tilt my feet to the side. Now I pick up the ball in the middle of my body. So when I go to raise it, everything stays in line, my elbow's pointed, my wrist is underneath the rim. Now I go to shoot through the middle of the basketball. So if you're struggling with shooting 10 toes to the rim and you feel like you're almost fighting your body or you're trying to overcorrect your shot in the end, I would encourage you to introduce a small tilt to your shot. So slightly turn your feet to the side. So if you think you're about like you're in a clock and your feet are at 12 o'clock, if you are left-handed, your feet should slightly turn towards 1 o'clock. But if you're right-handed, your feet should slightly turn towards 11 o'clock. So now you can get your strong side closer to the target. So if you think about any other throwing sports, they all want their strong side closer to where they're going. Same thing with basketball. If I'm turned and now I go to raise and lift the basketball, when I go to push through the middle, now my strong side is closer to that target. I don't want to overturn. Sometimes when you're 10 toes to the rim, when you raise the basketball, you feel like you want to turn in the air. We can eliminate that turn just by initiating that tilt earlier. Remember, shooting is not about being perfect. It's about finding what's comfortable for you and sticking with the principles. If you want something to help you out along your journey to help you become a knockdown shooter, just go to the pinned comment below and get your copy of our ultimate shooting checklist.